and I wasn't live. How nuts is that? I did it again. So I'm sorry if you've been waiting. I've actually been waiting and you've been waiting, and here I am. I think this happens with all my lives. I start a live and I wait for people to show up for ages and no one does, and I don't know why. It's because it's set to unlisted, and you'll only, it's not, you're not going to find out. And of course I don't have a link for it. I don't know why it does that. So I'll just give you a minute or two to settle in. I've got Puppy right beside me here. Inside today because it's just awful out there. Well, so this is our weekly live where we just get together to chat about life, the universe, and everything. I am a big sci-fi fan, but today, because I have not managed to organize myself to come online and do a live to follow up on the big Phoenix energy that we had the other day, I thought I would just talk to that, which means if none of you managed to make it, it's okay. I will just speak to it anyway. And you can watch it later. So the other day, we did the Phoenix Stone message, and it brought up a lot for me. And I want to quickly say that this isn't a teaching live, okay? It's a staying with live. Although I will get into teaching aspects because that's just kind of what I do. I'll try not to make it, I'll make it more conversational if I can. So making that video, the Phoenix video, stirred something really, really deep in me. It really stirred me a lot. Excuse me, I'm just trimming all of the thingies while he's lying beside me. We don't do this a lot anymore. Don't get him to lie quietly beside me much anymore. Did it a lot as a puppy, didn't we, darling? Oh, I did it on the other video. I've got Tiki with me right beside me on the bed here. And he's just lying here being Tiki. Anyway, back to what we're doing. Yeah, something, and I figured that if it stirred something in me, it probably stirred something in you too. Because no man is an island, or woman for that matter. So I figure that if something stirred in me, it'll be stirred in others as well. And that's the main reason why I wanted to do this. And I apologize that I haven't got round to it earlier in the week. I had full intentions of it, but after 2 aborted attempts, I decided that it was probably just wise to leave it until my regular slot because I was having so much trouble organising myself through this really wet week we're having here in Otago. Oh, there he goes. So the best way to get rid of him is to bring the scissors out. So, that video came from a very real place in me. I spoke to the fact that as a child I was really sensitive, but I didn't really, I just skimmed over the top. I didn't talk much to it, just got skimmed over the top for the video. But as a child, I was incredibly sensitive. I spoke about how the UNICEF ads would upset me. They really upset me, seeing those Biafran children and the UNICEF ads as a child. other children like me with their big swollen bellies and all their ribs showing through tight skin, dehydrated and undernourished. And the looks in the mother's eyes. The mother's eyes got me. Hello, welcome. Oh, and gone. The mother's eyes got me. And I felt it. And I would cry. Hello, welcome. I'm just talking, this is our regular live, but because I didn't get to speak about the Phoenix Stone the other day when I was supposed to, keep not being able to organize myself to go live at this time. Say hello so I know who you are. So I had to shut down to survive. I had to learn how to cut the pain of the world out, because I didn't feel that I could hold it. I didn't feel that I could hold that emotion. You know, and even when my daughter, my firstborn, died, I didn't feel I could hold that emotion either. So I found ways to avoid it. So it's taken me a long, long time to learn not to avoid those emotions. You know, I learned to avoid emotions so that it wouldn't affect me so deeply, because I couldn't carry it. You don't really have the skills as a child. When I lost my daughter, I was only 24, and we like to think you're adults at that age, but we still have a lot of learning. Welcome, say hello so I know who you are. We still have a lot of learning at 24. So I shut down, and that's how I managed to reduce my sensitivity. And for me, that just became my normal. My normal was learning to not feel, avoiding the things that made me feel so deeply. So it wasn't a weakness. Like, I don't see the ability to feel emotion deeply as a weakness, although I felt it was a fault at the time. I felt that there was something wrong with me, that the rest of the world didn't feel this way. And as a child, and I've said this already, I couldn't carry that. So that shutdown to survive was my way of coping. It was my way of adapting to the pain that I saw around me. I saw it reflected on the television and the advertisements. It was a form of intelligence, emotional intelligence. And you know, it started off being those Biafran children, and then it was Ethiopia, and just seeing the depth of cruelty that humans inflict on each other. I didn't know how to cope with that as a child. I don't know how to cope with it as an adult. So the best thing, the natural thing to do as children, is we learn to just shut down. We shut down. But there comes a time in our lives as adults we need it's so important to be able to actually hold that, once we have the emotional maturity to be able to hold it, to be able to look at it and understand that it's not weakness. In fact, being able to hold that much sensitivity and that much pain is really a strength. And you know, we spoke about neurodivergence on on the Phoenix message. And it's not something that I speak to very often, because it's something that is still a little raw when I found out that I was neurodivergent. And neurodivergent is a broad umbrella. Basically means that you aren't neurologically normal. Not that normal is a real thing, but when it comes to neurology, the neurodiverse versus the neurotypicals. Neurotypical. If you're neurotypical, then you naturally understand the way that the world works. You understand other people. You naturally understand body language. You pick up cues from body language. You pick up cues from facial expressions and tone of voice. And if you're neurodiverse, you don't pick up those cues. Those are things that need to be learned. And as girls, we do learn them quite early, but they're not natural. We tend to read books and learn how to be in the world from stories that we read. For me, that was Enid Blyton. I learned how to be a girl from Georgina because she's a tomboy. So, doing what I do, I go off track. So I was saying that neurodivergence is a broad spectrum umbrella. It's a very broad umbrella. You know, we have autism, which itself is a broad spectrum. You go from the non-verbal, I don't like the word severe, those who are most unlike neurotypicals, all the way through to what they call high functioning, which I think is a misnomer. It's more a high masking, because they have the ability to mask almost all of their neurodivergence. That's just autism. So that's this massive, huge spectrum. And there's everything in between those two. And then we have ADHD, which also is a spectrum where it can be as simple as needing everything to be in its place, which overlaps with autism. And as far as it's just having absolutely no executive function. High sensitivity itself comes under the neurodivergent umbrella. Deep empathy, which does come with high sensitivity, but they are slightly different, because highly sensitive means that you actually pick up on the currents, the energy in a space, whereas empathy is more the feelings. And the pattern-based nervous systems, they're neurodivergent as well. And to be honest, I don't know what the opposite of pattern-based is. But someone with a pattern-based nervous system recognizes patterns instantly. It's like everything is patterns. Life's patterns. And this is one of my strengths, so I can speak to it. When everything is patterns, you see that maths is a pattern, language is a pattern, music is a pattern. And you see that maths and music are languages, because language is a pattern. So, and it makes you good at jigsaws, right? Jigsaw puzzles. But that's only such a small thing, because the pattern recognition, also the downside of it, of course, is that you can see the patterns. And if you're trying to do something academically, like equations and stuff, you miss steps because you don't even see that there is a step there, because your mind recognizes a pattern and jumps to the end without going through all of the steps. So that's the umbrella of neurodiversity. But the core truth is that many of us didn't feel too much. It's just that we felt without buffers, because a neurotypical brain has the ability to buffer things, and a neurodiverse brain doesn't. A neurodiverse brain takes in everything, which is why pattern recognition is so strong. Whereas a neurotypical brain has buffers and can buffer it out. And so as a neurodiverse person, and you don't have the buffers, you don't understand that other people buffer it, and you need to learn things to put those buffers in place. Learn masking to put those buffers in place. Masking isn't lying. Masking's learning a facade that protects that sensitive inner core. And the thing is, many of us learn masking very, very young. And if, as I've spoken about before, if we learn something before we have words, then we often can't put words to it. Masking becomes a protection. It protects those soft and sensitive parts of ourselves. So there's nothing wrong with someone who's neurodiverse. I know for me that was a real biggie, learning that I am okay. Learning that I was neurodiverse. At first it was a shock. Because I didn't want to be stuck in the same bucket as people who flap their hands, because I was raised to believe that was such an awful thing. But there's nothing wrong with it. It was just the programming that I was given. Someone needs to stim whatever that is. I used to sit and click a pen all the time and drive everybody mad. I used to sit and flick coins and make them spin on the table. I loved the way it spun, that rhythmical motion. It calmed my brain. And we tend to, and I was raised to label it as different, as wrong. And so I learned to mask, to hide those parts of myself that my mother couldn't accept. And I think everybody who's neurodiverse does the same thing. We learn to mask those parts of ourselves that mother or father can't accept. Oh my goodness, it goes more than neurodiverse. And I guess you can consider children who, like little girls that don't feel like little girls, and little boys that don't feel like little boys. It's okay for a girl to be a tomboy, isn't it? It's perfectly acceptable. But is it okay for a boy to want to dress up and play with dolls rather than trucks? And I think that's a very sad indictment of our society, that girls are allowed to, but boys aren't. Girls can be boys, but boys can't be girls. In their play choices. And so it's okay for people to be different, is what I'm trying to get at here. The Phoenix stone comes to tell us that difference and diversity is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. I've often said, almost all my life, I've said, it doesn't matter that, isn't it wonderful that people are different? Isn't it wonderful that I'm not the same as you? How boring would the world be if everyone was exactly the same? If we all thought the same? If we all saw the world through the same lens? Because isn't diversity what enriches life? You think about diversity in nature, a field with great diversity of plants, different grasses and herbs and stuff mixed in. It's a very rich environment. In fact, it's the best pasture there is, as opposed to a monoculture. So when we look at the natural world, we see diversity everywhere. And I could go down a whole nother rabbit hole on that one. But when we look at nature, we see diversity everywhere. Nature is not a monoculture. That's what I love about permaculture, but that's another rabbit hole. So another note I've got here is feeling versus flooding. And that's it. There's the core of it. Everybody feels. Not just everybody, the animals feel, plants feel, right? If you are alive, you feel. But there's a difference between feeling and flooding. When the feelings are so intense, they just flood your whole system. And that's what it was like to see those UNICEF ads as a child. It flooded my whole system. There was no capacity for anything else. In learning how to mask, how to suppress the flooding, is a form of boundaries, right? Just as there's a difference between feeling and flooding, there's a difference. Interesting, flooding, it's been raining so much, there's flooding everywhere. There's a feeling between openness and a lack of boundaries. We can have strong boundaries and still be open. But again, from a neurodiverse perspective, that's a very difficult line to walk. And because I'm not neurotypical, I can't speak to that. So I don't know, neurotypical people, do you find boundaries easy or are they difficult? I'd love to know. Please comment. Let me know. If as a neurotypical person you find setting boundaries easy. Because I know as a neurodiverse person, and almost all of the neurodiverse people I know have trouble with boundaries. Some don't. And I wonder if that's a learned thing. Because for self-preservation, they had to have really strong boundaries as children. And so they just have this boundary that's just a no, an instant no, no matter what, it's just a no. Stay out of my space, no. I know my wife had good boundaries like that. She was neurodiverse. But then there's also a difference between compassion and self-erasure. Because along with this huge feeling of sensitivity is compassion. I mean, the reason that seeing those Biafran children on TV was so heartbreaking for me was because of the compassion that I carried, the empathy. I saw the pain, I felt the pain. But there's a difference between that and self-erasure. The erasure of self, which happens to most neurodiverse people. They erase themselves in order to appear normal. I have a note here that says why just feel more is unsafe advice for neurodiverse people. It's because you need to feel safe before you can feel more. And you know, grieving is such a heavy thing to deal with. The emotions are so huge, they're big. They're the biggest things we ever carry. And like I said earlier, when I lost my firstborn, those emotions were too big for me to carry. So I avoided them. So when my second daughter came along, they came back to bite me in the butt. We can avoid them for so long, but when it comes to grieving, then comes a time that we need to face them, to give them a container so that we can open the lid and feel them a little bit and close the lid again until we can be with them fully. And showing yourself that compassion is what my work is really about. Is self-love, self-compassion, and being able to open the space in yourself to feel what needs to be felt, to hold what needs to be held. But before we can do that, we have to feel safe. And finding that safety is very hard. You can't heal until you feel safe. So we need to find that safety. For me, that safety came in the form of my wife. For the first time in my life, I felt that somebody understood me. Somebody created a space for me to feel safe and feel what was there waiting to be felt, and take off all the masks. And as you take off all the masks, that in itself is a deeply emotional thing, because the masks get slowly removed one at a time, like peeling the layers of an onion. And you start to realize how much of yourself you have hidden for so long. How you've changed to fit in. And you start to wonder who you really are. If you're there, I really get it. 100% get it. I understand really why you feel that way and where you are. And as we unmask, it has to be gradual. It can't all happen at once. And it happens relationally, you know, in situations that allow the unmasking. So a situation will happen and you'll start to respond in the masked way and realize that you have this mask. And that's the first step, realizing there's a mask, and then there's a letting the mask down just a little bit. And they're scary because as we start to peel them away, we're faced with all those things that we buried all those years ago, all the feelings. And you start having meltdowns on meltdowns on meltdowns because it's just too much for your system. But if you're if you're safe, you can do that. You can let those things happen. You don't get told you're having a tantrum. It's a meltdown, it's a system overload. So this stone came up the other day because it wanted me to talk about integration. It wanted me to talk about post-survival and the wisdom of rising from the ashes. You know, it's seen as an ascension stone. People buy it thinking that it'll help them ascend. That's not how it works. Because crystals work on the energetics. They subtly change the energetics of the environment that they're in. And the phoenix has a wide-ranging effect. It doesn't just affect the home. It affects the community, the planet. So all of this all came up the other day as I was doing my research and planning my my crystal medicine around the phoenix stone. And there was so much in there that it couldn't all fit into one little, I can't remember if it was a 12-minute one or one of them been 17 minutes lately. It might have been Phoenix, I can't remember. And as I said in the Phoenix message, you know, when I met Sue, I'd already been doing the work. I'd been doing a lot of work on for a long time. It started with Tony Robbins in the 90s. Got his CDs. Well, actually his cassettes, and then they became CDs. And learning how to phrase my language in a more positive way, to remove don't and can't and need, should, and rephrase sentences so they no longer leaned on the guilt, and so they no longer told the brain. Like if you say, don't forget, the brain doesn't hear the don't. And learning that to always say, remember. Because that's what you're really saying when you say don't forget, you're saying, remember. Little things like that, I started learning that in the 90s. So by the time I met Sue in 2016, I'd already done a lot of that reprogramming internal work. I started reprogramming 80s. So Sue didn't come along and save me. It wasn't a matter of feeling like I needed to be saved. She offered the safety that I needed in order to heal. And that safety changes everything. This is just all the stuff that came up when I was researching this. Is so much emotion. Safety changes everything. Because our nervous systems heal in relationship. Our nervous systems don't heal when we're isolated. They don't heal when we're in abusive situations. Our nervous systems heal in safe relationship when we feel safely held in a container. That allows us, our nervous systems, ourselves, to be what we are, to express as we are, without feeling that there is something wrong with us, inherently wrong. And once the vigilance drops, and that's what it was, is a feeling of vigilance, of being guarded all the time. When that drops, our feelings start to return. When our feelings start to return, we go into overwhelm. Even though we're safe, feeling held in a safe container, we still go into overwhelm. And that's when being in a safe space, safe relational space, matters. Because that love that doesn't demand explanation is the medicine. And that's what she gave to me. Love that didn't demand explanation. Not having to explain myself. Just being able to be me. Wherever I was that day. Feeling the pain of something that had happened to me. Feeling the pain of something that happened to somebody else. Realizing how much I had hidden of myself from the world. For fear of being vilified, teased, hurt. Because when you're different, you get teased a lot as a child. Because other children are scared when they see the difference. And so that they do cruel things, and we learn to mask and to shut things down that people see as different. You know, if that's happened to you, I see you. I see you, I know what that is. To not be accepted because you're different. You know, one of the advantages of that difference, there's several advantages in being different and being neurodivergent. And I'll just share a few of them. One is empathy. Because you're able to see things from someone else's perspective. You don't necessarily have to have experienced it to be able to understand, to perceive what it feels like. And there's a deep sense and an ability to deeply sense what others feel. Not just people, animals too. And I spoke about the pattern recognition and how it helps with jigsaws, but it helps with other things. Rather than knowing who someone is by their face, you know who they are by their voice, by the way they walk, the way they use their body. Because everybody uses their body in a slightly different way. And my wife Sue, she didn't notice faces. She was a vet. and somebody would come in to see her with their animal. Say someone came in to see her with the dog. They'd come in, she'd know the dog instantly. She never forgot an animal. She'd know the dog's name. She'd know its entire history, that she had dealt with it over its lifetime. Instant recall. But the person, she had no idea. And so the human and the dog would leave her treatment room, and she'd go out, and one of the nurses would say something about that person. She'd go, "Who's that? They were just in the room with you." "No." "Yeah." And then they'd say the name of the dog. "Oh, yeah." And she'd know. So she walked right past me at a market one day. Didn't recognise me. But if I had my back turned to her, she knew who I was immediately. Couldn't recognise my face, but she recognised my back. That's neurodivergence. And in her, the neurodivergence went deeper, that pattern recognition. She had a highly developed sense of smell. And she'd be able to tell, an animal would walk in the room and she'd use all her senses, her sight, her smell, her hearing, everything. See the way the animal moved. And she would, 90% of the time, know what was wrong within seconds of the animal walking into the treatment room. That made her a brilliant vet. But she wasn't good at relating with people. That's that pattern recognition and the non-linear knowing. She's a great surgeon because she could envisage, before she even went in, she knew what she was looking for. She could see it in 3D in her own mind. I don't have those visual skills. Those imaginative skills. And that's the wonderful thing about neurodiversity. No two of us are the same. They say you meet one neurodiverse, you meet one neurodiverse. Every single one of us is different. Completely different. These are ancient skills. These are skills that were highly valued in older communities. Pattern recognition, ability to notice when things aren't normal. The heightened sense of smell, heightened sense of hearing. That non-linear knowing. You know, I've often said that if it wasn't for neurodivergence, man would still be living in caves without fire. So my foot keeps on going to sleep. It's not good sitting long for a long time in one place on my bunk. Can't sit straight because the dog crate's under my feet. And I can't sit outside because it's raining and winding. These skills, go back to these skills, you know, I've always said that without neurodiverse people, humankind would still be in caves and not have fire. Because those unexpected things, that realizing that when you knock two rocks together that a spark formed, or that when you rub these two bits of wood together, it started a smouldering fire. These aren't neurotypical things to explore. It's a neurodiverse way of thinking. They're ancient skills. But it's been devalued by industrial culture. Because the industrial culture needs sameness. It needs people who don't question. It needs soldiers. And we're seeing a massive return of these skills now. And there's telepathy tapes, though. I can't remember her name, but the work that this woman's been doing with the autistic children is brilliant, because it's allowing people to see the strengths. Non-verbal children, they can't speak, they can't explain. She's found a way to communicate with them. And that strong telepathy is something that has actually been known for a long time. In fact, someone's actually done some studies on it and is documenting it, getting it out there into the public. If you haven't heard of them, the telepathy tapes. She's working with autistic children. And their non-linear knowing. Hello, say hello so I know who you are. When you come in, say hello. So these skills are all returning now because we're in a time of such deep change, great change, where those neurodivergent skills are greatly needed. Massive cultural shifts happening. Growing conversations around change. In astrology circles, there's huge talk about big changes that are happening over the next few years, all being started by what's happening this year. Neurodiverse people are very much in their bodies. They don't seem like they are, but they are. And the cultural shifts that are happening now, the large number of neurodiverse children that are coming onto the planet, and people who've been neurodiverse, older people like myself who are having a late life diagnosis. The acceptance of neurodiversity is driving cultural change. And this is all to do with this ascension through the body. There are people, and I know I've spoken to this before, but it bears repeating. When I first found spirituality, I remember sitting there and trying to open my third eye, concentrating on my third eye, trying to relax, trying to push it open, trying to let it open so that I could, see through my third eye, so I could be more spiritual. What I didn't realize, and we go full circle now back to the beginning, is that when we feel safe in our bodies, when we feel safe on this planet, is who we are. We return to our bodies. Remember who we are as animals on this planet. Then, once we're grounded and in our bodies, we open our hearts. Through our hearts and through our lived presence, we do what they call as ascension. Ascension is a descension. You can't reach spiritual enlightenment by concentrating on opening your third eye and your crown chakras. You reach spiritual enlightenment through embodiment, through safety, through feel grounded and safe, and opening your heart. The heart is a portal. It always was, but false spirituality just twisted it. There's enough in it that makes it sound real, sound true, that it draws you in and takes you down the wrong path. Right here. I just want to say this right now. For anyone here who had to shut down to survive, may your system know that it doesn't have to open all at once. Only when it's safe. And sometimes that's a little bit at a time. And you can type a safe to feel or a little dicotyledon emoji, the two leaves. We don't know what dicot is in the comments. If you want to, just anchor this in. You can say it this way: may my system know it doesn't have to open all at once, only when it's safe. Because safety is the first step. This really tried to teach us. And this is big, which is why I had to do something more than what we did in the actual message for Phoenix. This is big. It doesn't all resolve at once. It doesn't happen overnight. The old Pantene ad. It won't resolve tonight. But consistent work. Feeling grounded, feeling safe. Safe enough to allow the layers to slowly peel off. I offer a quiet one-on-one space where we can work together with relational safety. You're safe to be who you are and allow the layers to peel off. There's no fixing and no pushing. Can't fix anybody. You can only create space that allows you to heal. There's one other thing I wanted to speak to. I put it over here before I close for the day. Being too loud from yesterday, which was septarian. That being too loud. We were told not to be too loud. And that ties into this as well, into the Phoenix story. Because the Phoenix story is about being able to be true to who you really are. And that really touched me. And I had to include it in last night's message. We were told not to be too loud. Oh my goodness. Children were made to be seen and not heard. It didn't even go more so if you were a female child. Don't be heard. Don't be too loud. Quiet. You see it in the older generations with women who are quiet, speak quietly and gently all the time. They use guilt trips to get what they need, because that's the way they've learned to survive. Being too loud. It really hit me, and I know it hit one of my followers because she commented on it. How she also was told not to be too loud. And you know, I won't call you out. That's all a part of this Phoenix energy too. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching. I put a little thing at the beginning of this to say that I speak slowly. You can listen to me at 1.5 times and it won't sound too fast. You don't rise by burning again. You rise when it's finally safe to be whole. And what I've really been saying through all of this whole live transmission, is that this is all about staying with what becomes safe enough to surface. Staying with what becomes safe enough to surface. May you feel safe. May you feel held. May you know that you are worthy, that you have a place in life on this beautiful planet of ours. And may you know how loved you really are, even when you feel so dreadfully alone. Thanks for watching this. Thanks for sitting with me. Have a beautiful, blessed day or evening. And I will be back in the morning with your next daily sacred soul message. I don't know what it is yet. I haven't pulled the card. I was thinking I might do that while I was live, but because that could be fun, an early reveal for someone who's here live with me. But I don't think that's happening today, because people are just coming and going. No one stopped and stayed today. Thank you. Much love to you.